Welcome to the Scripted podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Kevin O'Connor, marketing director here at Scripted.
And I'm John Parr, writer community manager.
And today we are talking about marketing in politics. I don't know what made us want to talk about this subject in this particular time, but it seems oddly appropriate, don't you think, John?
I would say so. It's that very special time of year, and this is a very special episode of the Scripted podcast.
Indeed. Our guest today is Mr. Keegan Goudiss, former director of digital advertising for Bernie 2016 and co-founder of 1215.co, a company focused on helping political organizations, nonprofits, and agencies scale. Keegan has been on the front lines of a major presidential campaign, and we're hoping he can tell us what the experience is like as a marketer and shed some light on what both campaigns must be going through a week out from this historic election.
Yeah, this is going to be really exciting. Of course, you know, none of the views expressed in this episode are representative of Scripted. We are but mere employees running this humble podcast, but I think it's going to be super exciting to kind of get a view of what it looks like, right, on the other side of a political campaign.
Absolutely, I'm excited. Let's bring in Keegan.
Cool, let's get into it. And this is probably where we should play like a vaguely political broadcast song.
Keegan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Thanks for being here. I guess first, why don't you tell us a little bit about Revolution Messaging and how you got started with Bernie 2016?
Yeah, so I was the first hire for Revolution Messaging in 2009 and became a partner a year later in the firm. And you know, it was one of those stories where like right place, right time. We were, you know, a few nerds who knew how to make websites and run ads on what was the very beginnings of the Facebook ad platform, and things just kind of took off because there was no one at the time really doing that in politics. You know, we built a text message platform and a calling platform, and you know, we originally started off as a way to bring mobile marketing tactics to political campaigns because that no one was doing that yet, and that evolved into becoming a full scale digital agency. Back then, we called it new media, and then it became digital. So you know, we were working with Martin O'Malley's team in 2014, and we got in an argument with his TV consultant that you know, he was advising the governor to run to the right of Hillary Clinton. We told him he was fucking crazy. I'm sorry, I should have asked, can I actually curse on this?
Yeah.
You can now.
Okay. And so, you know, like, and that TV consultant actually didn't end up working with the O'Malley campaign. But we were like, you know, we're not going to go, you know, we're a bunch of democratic socialists, although we didn't know the term then, but, you know, we're not going to go and work on a campaign that's to the right of Hillary Clinton. So we left that, which thankfully turned out to be a good decision. And, you know, we were like, well, we know some people who work with Bernie Sanders, and he's an amazing senator. And, you know, we were all fans of his. And so we started, you know, pitching them. And, you know, Bernie hadn't made up his mind if he was going to run or not. And we started, you know, meeting with him and his team, and had good meetings. He liked our ideas. And then, you know, we got called in. I'll never forget this moment. We got called into an office at the DSCC, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. And you know, we were meeting with him and Jane and his chief of staff at the time and a few other consultants. And he told us, okay, well, I'm going to run. We're like, great. You know, like when do you think you're going to file? And he's like, Thursday. And this was Monday. Mm-hmm. We're like, oh, you know, do you think you could maybe file later? He's like, well, no, I'm just going to file the paperwork on Thursday. I'll announce the campaign later. It's like, no, once you file the paperwork,
it's announced
that you're running for president. You know, we didn't have a website. We didn't have anything ready to go. And so we tried and failed at dissuading him from running, but his mind was made up, you know, from announcing then. And I, you know, if you look back, there's a really funny video of him. You know, we convinced him to, well, actually, this was Tad, his TV consultant, but, you know, convinced him to like, well, you have to talk to the press when you file the paperwork. So he went out in this, you know, famously Bernie moment in front of the Capitol for a press conference to announce he was running for president. And he's like, I got to get back to work. Okay, bye. At the end of it. But yeah, like from that moment, we were, as we called it, building the plane while it was flying. It was, everything was kind of in the seat of your pants for the entire campaign. And, obviously took off in ways that none of us could have imagined.
Right. So like, I guess that was kind of set a precedent for you guys where it was kind of just full steam ahead as soon as you started.
That set the tone. It was always, how can we do things very, very quickly and react quickly. And luckily for us, we had a team that was really good at that. And, I'm sure you see this in the business world as well. Like with digital marketing, being able to act nimble is really critical for success.
It's everything. Yeah. I imagine you guys had a lot of sleepless nights.
Yes. Yeah, it was tough. And, like part of I didn't work on a presidential for 2020, but it was like part of that was just because I don't think my body could have handled it again.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So your work with Martin O'Malley, I guess, didn't last very long, but it made me think of what was that relationship like with Bernie 2016 with the other arms of his campaign? How does that kind of work?
It was very siloed in 2016. Like to their credit, the 2020 campaign did a better job of this. We set up. We were the first consultants in there besides Tad and Julian and Mark. And we found out later that the original plan was to hire us to help teach his staff what to do and then fire us. But we were because Bernie doesn't like consultants, and that's kind of his thing. He doesn't trust consultants, and I get that. But being a consultant, I obviously think that I'm valuable, and I think that there is always a need for having a consultant. But I can also understand where having someone on your staff doing most of the work is valuable too. So we had created this digital operation in DC. There was the Burlington headquarters. And then there was the staff that traveled with him, and like the epicenter of the campaign was really, traveling with Bernie, because once the rally started taking off, that was he was always on the road, and so there was like kind of a traveling campaign. There was the Burlington office that dealt with a lot of things in the non-digital space, and then the digital team that was in DC out of our office.
So did the strategy come from the main campaign team, and then you guys kind of implemented that in the digital realm? Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, a lot of it was just like capturing what Bernie was really the one who dictated the strategy most of all. Tad and Julian definitely played a role in helping to kind of take some of the things he was talking about and turn it into stuff that was used for us. But we were also like on the digital side, we had a lot of leeway to, okay, well, here's the messaging that Bernie wants to talk about. And, how can we apply this to a digital lens? But, Bernie was always someone who wanted to make sure that it was something he was comfortable with, which happens a lot in politics, obviously. It's, like the Trump campaign in 20, I can't speak to it now, but I would say that like Trump's campaign and our campaign was similar in that there was a lot more leeway of stuff that people had their own autonomy. And actually, I think that works better for digital marketing. Whereas like Hillary's campaign in 2016, there was like 20 people signing off on a tweet. So there was as digital advertising director, I was able to do, I'd get a budget signed off, and I was able to do pretty much what I wanted with it, which was a great experience having not had that before. But there was one time when we ended up getting a little too close to Bernie's rule, which is don't attack Hillary Clinton. So some of our ads that we were running in New Hampshire, they were there was a reporter that asked Bernie, like, well, what about this ad where you're criticizing Hillary Clinton? And he hadn't heard of it and was very upset that he was called out on that, understandably. And so from that moment on, I had to clear all the ad creative with research. Right. But that was a generally easy hoop to go through.
One thing I'd be curious about is in 2016, there was just this massive grassroots movement behind Bernie Sanders. What did you guys do, as part of the team to sort of wrangle that? How does that work?
So there's different schools of thought on this. So, depending on who you talk to, they'll have different perspectives. But mine is that the chaos in the beginning and us trying to build the plane actually helped fuel that grassroots growth, because there was not really enough of an operation in place to harness it. So people went and started their own things. Like People for Bernie, there were hundreds of Facebook groups that popped up of people who were supporting Bernie and their community. And that to me was one of the strengths of the campaign. But I'm someone who advocates, decentralized organizing. There's certainly arguments to be made for top-down marketing approaches, but to me, if you can inspire people to do their own work, that's the smartest marketing approach. And I actually feel like Bernie's campaign did that really well in 2015, partly by accident.
Can you tell us a little bit about your specific ad placements? Was it just Google ads, Facebook? Did you use a lot of third-party stuff in 2016?
Yeah, we like to experiment a lot. Most of the advertising that we did, with the exception of Iowa and New Hampshire, was trying to build his fundraising program. So everything was viewed under the lens of what the return on ad spend was, and experimented with a lot of different vendors. We had our own programmatic abilities in house with our own trading desk at the firm at the time. But a lot of it leaned heavily on Facebook and Google. Obviously, that's the case with most other performance marketing operations. And we were lucky that they didn't do this anymore because of Russia. But we had a lot of support from Facebook on making sure that our spend with them was optimized.
So was it in the end, were your KPIs just about fundraising, or were there other engagement metrics that you guys followed?
So on the fundraising side, it was a combination of top of the funnel, cost per acquisition, or cost per conversion for certain actions. I would say a large majority of it was focused on what the return on ad spend was. We tracked it over several months. So we had certain options that were working well in the short term, but in the long term kind of fizzled out. And then we had other placements that we made that were much stronger over the long term as they engage with the program. Building his list was generally a high priority, but making sure we were building a list of people who took actions was critical for that. We also did early on, we used advertising to help build the events, but there was except for one moment in Seattle, there was after Wisconsin, the summer of 2015, they didn't really need ads to build the events anymore. The reputation was enough to suffice filling arenas. But there was one time it was the spring of 2016, I think. We was doing a rally at a baseball stadium in Seattle. I can't remember the name right now, but they were like, "Oh shoot, we might not be able to fill this," so we had to spend a bunch of money quickly to fill the stadium to make sure it looked good, because with politics, optics is everything. So,
oh God, yeah,
and I think I actually remember that rally being a huge deal when they showed the stadium filled.
Yeah, and so advertising had to help with that one there. Sorry for spoiling that.
This is what people need to know.
That's right.
Well, it's advertising is sometimes looked at as a dirty thing in politics, and obviously I'm biased, but what we're doing is making sure the people that we know or think would like to see this are seeing it. There's a lot of noise online. Email doesn't always get through, so email was a big driver of event attendances for Bernie, because we had a big list and we would target that zip code, your radius around that zip code, and we get a lot of RSVPs off of that. But not everybody looks at their email, so to me, being able to pay to make sure that they see that message is important, but some people don't look at it that way.
Well, this will be picked up by conspiracy theorists to say that they're paid actors now at that rally.
No paid actors. We didn't pay for the bird to land. That was never bothering.
For sure. So one thing I'd be curious about is obviously in especially in today's age, right? The turnaround time responding to current events, especially for political campaigns, is faster than ever. What kind of turnaround times were you guys looking at with certain events? And aside from the stadium, do you have any other examples of those?
Yeah, with the stadium, it was a couple of days out. There was a panic of we might not actually be able to fill the stadium, and what can we do? But there were times where it was hours. So I was talking about the bird who landed it on his podium, and that was another famous moment during the campaign. And one person in our office, and I think this was Tim, but I could be misremembering, but had the idea of like let's make stickers, and how quickly can we make sure that our printer and our fulfillment vendor can like get this out quickly. How soon can the designer make the design of the sticker? How soon can we get ads up? And that raised like a couple $1 million over the course of a day, due in part to ads. It took off organically too, but like the ads helped fuel that as well.
And because our industry is so new, you didn't really have a ton of experience to do stuff like this quickly, right? Before Bernie 26.
We were flying by the seat of our pants, but I was really lucky that I had a lot of talented people that I worked with, and they don't allow political ads anymore, so we can't do this anymore. But on Twitter, they had a team that was able to help us with making sure that we were optimizing the spend and being able to spend as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We had background in doing this for other campaigns. There had been similar work that we'd done, but never really at the scale, and that can be really daunting.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I mean, you've mentioned it a couple times now. Let's talk about the difference between 2016 and now, that basically political ads have been banned across those major platforms. What is the, I guess, landscape look like for someone in your position for these two campaigns?
Yeah, we've pretty much gone from birds to flies in like 4 years.
What creature is going to be next? Right? I have my money on lizards.
Wise choice. Wise choice.
Yeah, no, there is. In some ways, it's quite enjoyable because it creates a whole new challenge. There was after once Trump was inaugurated, all of 2017, it was like shooting fish in a barrel, trying to raise money for clients. People were really scared and upset and pissed off, and on both sides, people there. And this, Trump brought this whole new media environment, and with it, like a lot of business for people, quite frankly, and it wasn't that hard to tap into it. It was exhausting, and so but I didn't find that as challenging as the 2016 campaign, and in some ways it became monotonous, and so I look at on the silver linings with this, that there is a challenge to figure out new ways to use advertising to power these programs, because the ways that were working before are just not working as well, or are being outlawed.
What's your involvement been in the 2020 election?
I tried to stay neutral because I had friends both on Bernie and Elizabeth Warren's campaign that I was going to be happy with whoever won. Obviously, my heart was with Bernie. I pissed off a number of folks in the inner circle early on because I had talked to the press about whether or not he should actually run. I was of the mindset that Bernie would have done more for the movement if he hadn't run and played the role of king or queen maker, because I just didn't feel like he could win. And I was happy when I felt like I was maybe going to be proven wrong, and then sad again that I wasn't proven wrong. But it just, unfortunately, becoming the nominee of the Democratic Party requires some inside politics that Bernie will never be good at, and I'm happy that he's not good at it. And I was worried that he was never able to succeed in that. And for a little bit, I was like, well, I was wrong. I should have kept my mouth shut. Things are going really well. But I feel like their strategy was predicated on, well, we're going to win with a crowded field, and then that changed very quickly as we saw.
Right. Do you want to lament the pre-Super Tuesday actions of a few?
Yeah, it was. I felt like I saw it coming. Having worked really hard to try to get him to do better in South Carolina in 2016, I could see lots of warning signs that they were heading to the same sort of trap. I was really proud that they did so well in Nevada, because we didn't do as well as they did in 2020 in Nevada. And then when South Carolina happened, I was like, oh shit, like we've seen this play out before, and everybody who is not Bernie was waiting for that moment, and they piled on it. And like, again, like things, there's a saying, I don't remember who coined it, but I say it a lot, is a day is a lifetime in politics. It's
Yeah.
things change. Things do change overnight. So, there are a lot of people who are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe like there was this conspiracy," and I didn't view it as a conspiracy. It was just that there were a number of people worried about Bernie being the nominee, and once there was a option to go anti-Bernie, everybody jumped on that one.
Yeah, they made their move.
Yeah.
It's very Godfather-like.
So to kind of pull it back here a little bit, and really kind of shed light on the complexity of what you guys were doing. So obviously you had this team putting together all this marketing, but it's not just for the campaign as a whole, right? You had to change this individually, state to state. Is that right?
Yeah, it's brutal. And, anybody who, is listening to this that wants to work in presidential politics on a primary, hopefully you're as lucky as we were to get as far as Bernie did in 2016. And if you are the campaign was really, and 2020 did this much better from my perspective, but, the original theory of change was if we do well in Iowa and New Hampshire, that will lend credibility to his campaign. And really a lot of the non-fundraising marketing, the other marketing work that we were doing came down to what my business partner at the time, Arun Chaudhary, was focused on, which is how do we make Bernie look presidential? Because there are a lot of people who like Bernie and like what he's saying, but they don't believe he could ever be president.
Right.
And in politics, credibility is a really critical aspect. When building political power, if you're not credible, it's pretty much impossible. So we were trying a lot to make him look credible, and part of that was, can we do well, maybe even win in Iowa or New Hampshire, and that will shock the world and change the dynamics of the race. But there was never really a good enough, at least in the conversations I was a part of, and I was part of a lot of the ones at the top. There didn't seem to be a good plan of well, what happens then?
Right.
And so instead we were kind of thrown into this week by week. The one thing that was done very smart, by Mark and Tad and Julian is they brought us in early on a plan to use Michigan as a way to turn things back around again. And there was a friend of mine who worked on Hillary's campaign that we caught up with afterwards, and he was a little mad at me. But he was asking, "You all bought advertising really early in Michigan." And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I knew it. You all were planning." I was like, "Yeah, we were planning to do really well in Michigan and surprise everybody." And that worked out well. But for the most part, it was okay. Every week there is one or many more elections. What are we doing that week to squeeze out as much as possible? And it's organized chaos at best. So we did the best we could. But if anybody who's listening to this is planning a career in presidential politics, make sure you're ready for that gauntlet, because it comes really quickly, and you have to do a lot every week for the primary calendar.
Wait, was your friend mad at you who worked for Hillary Clinton because you didn't tell him to advertise in Michigan?
No. I mean, he was mad because I criticized his work publicly.
Well, that'll do it.
That explains it.
Yeah, I learned an important lesson is that sometimes it's better to just pass on your constructive feedback privately than to the press.
Sounds like you've gotten in trouble a couple times.
I have, yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's easy to do. So one thing I'd be curious about. So, on our platform here, scripted writers are regularly helping out customers who are trying to create content that is getting a leg up on their competitors. Obviously, the political world is completely different. These businesses don't have competitors who are, yelling into mics every night. So what does it look like on your end? What's the approach here to political opponents?
With Bernie, I can only speak to 2016 really very well on this one, but so it might be a little bit different in 2020. But it was a lot about let's focus on elevating our issues. When I was telling you that moment when Bernie told us he was going to file the paperwork in 3 days,
right?
He also told us that, and this is a private moment, I've also gotten in trouble for relaying before, but I've already gotten in trouble, so
let's hear it
again. But he also told us that look, I don't think, we all know I'm not going to be. He said, we all know that we're not going to be sitting together at inauguration. And Jane was like, no, Bernie. He's like, no, I like Hillary. She'll do a good job. I'm running because there are people who the people in this country are hardworking Americans who don't believe that government works for them anymore. I want to give people hope that there are those of us fighting for hardworking Americans who feel like money is going to millionaires and billionaires, and nothing is being used to help them. And I feel like by that metric, by that KPI, he succeeded wildly, and obviously at some point it became, well, actually could become president. But like for the most part, early on, it was about how do we raise the profile of these issues? How do we raise the profile of what Bernie's doing? And it turned out that there were even more people than we imagined early on were receptive to his message. There was some conquesting, as I like to call it, later on, where we were trying to pick off soft Hillary supporters as we got more strategic. But in the beginning, it was really much more about elevating his brand and his message. And to me, that like is really critical in any marketing effort to be able to differentiate yourself.
Right.
And there's probably some recently elected Congress people that can be very thankful for that campaign.
Yeah, some of them have really big reputations and brands themselves now.
Yeah, it's a whole different world than it was 4 years ago, for sure. Speaking of, I want to get back to the 2020 election. We are about, when this airs, about a week out from the election. What do you think is going through the minds of the marketing teams for each candidate right now? How much of these last 2 weeks are like crucial to the outcome, do you think?
Well, not to bring it back to 2016, but we learned, the final 2 weeks are critical, in that election, and they probably will be here too. As I said before, days of a lifetime, and we this happened in 2016 and is supposedly happening now, and so I don't necessarily buy it entirely, but supposedly on Trump's side, most of them are figuring out, well, what are they going to do next, because like this is over. But there were a number of them who thought that 4 years ago, and it didn't turn out that way. So I'm sure there's some of them are hoping that something magic will happen again for them. And I would say, I can't speak for exactly what's going through the Biden's team head, but I would imagine that they are just really looking forward to it being over. It's been a really long slog for them, and they're exhausted and want to make sure whatever final surprises come, they handle as well as possible and can finish this thing strong. But I would think that a lot of them wishes the election was right like today instead of having to wait, when this airs another week.
Yeah. So reports came in that Trump had a pretty soft Q3 fundraising, and since this is really your realm, how much of an indicator is it that they're spending 77 cents on every dollar as opposed to 2016 where they spent 37 of every dollar raised on reinvesting? And their cash on hand in October is what, 250 million compared to Biden's 432 million. What do those differences really mean as far as outcome prediction, if you can correlate the two?
Yeah, I mean, he's trending the wrong way. We'll see, how the next several days go, but it's certainly indicative, of the fact that their operation is not working. And a lot of, and this happened with Bernie too. Once the belief that you can win starts drying up, those small dollar donations dry up pretty quickly. And they've been running a fairly aggressive and I would say disingenuous program for a long time, and that only works for so long. I mean, there's lots of text that I'm going to show you the list to the president who donated. Are you going to be on it or not? There's an 800% match. I mean, I can send you some examples later if you want, but they go out of their way to manipulate their supporters to squeeze out every last dollar. And that worked well for them early on, but it runs out of steam. And then, now the president is, looking like he's going to lose. And so it gets harder and harder. And that's why you see, the statistics that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So they're obviously trying to reach a new base that might not be there.
I think they're just exhausted and tired. And his strategy is hopefully, in my opinion, hopefully is backfiring, which is, he's exhausted them. And I Trump only knows
Yeah.
how to keep up ramping up the energy, and I think that he's burnt them out. There's going to be probably several Hail Marys. Like the New York Post thing was one of them, and we'll see what else comes up. Between when this is recorded and aired, and then probably the final week, we're going to see
Yeah.
some Hail Marys, and maybe one of them will land. But my instinct now is that he's dug the hole too deep, and there's just too much shit there for him to get through.
It feels like more than the New York Post story, it was the response from Twitter and Facebook that kind of galvanized, maybe, if anything, his base. What are your thoughts on the way Twitter and Facebook handled that story? And I guess really how they're handling their approach to banning ads now and in the future.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of company on this opinion on the left, but I'm of the mindset that Facebook and Google and Twitter should just be hands off with this stuff, because, as you said, to your point, agree 100%. It wouldn't have been as big a deal if they didn't ban people from posting it. As soon as you make something forbidden, it's pretty clear what's going to happen. I mean, they did him a big favor. They should be making an in-kind contribution for that. To me, it's obvious disinformation, and it was elevated extremely by not allowing people to share it. I'm of the mindset that Facebook and Twitter shouldn't be the arbiters of the truth. That there does need to be something else that exists. In other countries, if you advertise falsely, you can be fined for that. That doesn't exist here. There's no government mechanism to try to reduce false info in advertising. But I'm of the mindset that there should be. Yeah, it's but so if you say something, if you can back it up, I think you should be able to say it and say it without impunity. But I don't think that Facebook and Twitter should be the ones deciding what's true or not, because that could easily go against us later on. There are those cheering it now and saying, "Oh no, we don't want to." We don't want them, posting these lies, but that could be flipped on us pretty easily. So, to me, it's a slippery slope, and I actually agree with Mark Zuckerberg on it, even though he's gotten attacked about it a lot. But I do think that they need to do a lot more in weeding out artificial engagement. They don't do enough in removing bots and trying to people who are trying to game their algorithms to push this misinformation or disinformation. They're not doing enough to combat that. Instead, they're well, we're just going to decide we'll restrict certain things, and I don't think that heads in a path that we want to go down.
It's kind of deceiving, the policy too. They're banning new political ads on Facebook. The existing ones are still going to
for
be
a
running,
week, but then
right?
they're going to they followed Google, and they're not going to allow any political. They're not going to allow any political ads after the election. Yeah,
and there's a school of thought that banning political ads is actually helpful for Trump and the right on Facebook in particular, because their organic reach is very right. I guess conservative groups have a lot of organic reach in Facebook.
Yeah, no,
right?
I'm a believer of that school of thought as well, and it's I did have some hope though that recently I saw that Biden had actually exceeded engagement on Twitter for the first time ever. Had beat Trump.
Really?
And we'll see if that was just a blip or continuation of trend, but it may be something. Going back to the previous discussion that kind of the well's running dry for Trump, and people are sick of him. So that benefits Biden because people want to talk about him more and engage with him more. So, obviously some of that's negative engagement or a lot of it maybe, but it's still him being talked about more on Twitter is a big deal.
So what do you think the future looks like from here, right? As far as the interplay between politics and social media.
Organic is much more important than it was before. We've always looked at it, and I think that it was a weakness of the left of well, we have we can use advertising to amplify our efforts when need be, and the right built this massive disinformation machine. And this huge network of media outlets that are helping to push organic engagement, and I think we looked at it the wrong way. And so the silver lining again I mentioned before of all these like bans that I think are going to continue is that it forces us to get better at that as well. I just started advising a company called Speechify, and they offer a platform for driving more social engagement and using AI to help assist activists in writing their posts. And so like to me, like the big opportunity right there is now on the advertising front. A lot of folks in politics are going to have to go underground and find like new ways of doing it, because it seems as though the trend is just going to keep growing that like commercial marketing will have access to things that political marketing will. And that makes me sad, to be clear. I just, I spent a number of years of my life working in the space, and it feels as though it's being ripped away from me. But you make the best of what you can.
For sure. Do you want to? I mean, I don't want to keep you too long. Do you want to tell us what you're working on now at 1215.com?
Yeah, so I had taken some time off. We closed Revolution Messaging at the end of 2019, and I was taking some time off to figure out what I wanted to do. I was talking to some folks about starting new agencies, joining other agencies, and then and then COVID hit and really threw out, like many other people, threw everything upside down, and I was all of a sudden had to find time to help my 3 elementary school age children adjust to a new way of learning, and myself adjust to having to help with 4th grade math at the time, which I found quite challenging. So it was, I was like, I can't start something new. I'm always someone like, if I'm going to do something, I want to be able to give it my all. And if I'm starting a brand new company or building a new software platform or something, it's I just don't have time for it right now. And my family had already suffered greatly at me being absent during the presidential campaign, so I didn't want to repeat that again. So I talked to my wife, and we were like, well, here's what I know, here's what you know, and let's just do some part-time consulting together. She has an accounting background, more familiar in back office operations than I am, and I obviously have background in marketing, advertising, and business growth and sales, and so we put this thing together called 1215 that is a way for folks to figure out how to navigate their own changes, and I'm doing that right now through the very unsexy product, which is audits. So I feel like a tax adjuster at times, but it like there's a lot of people out there who are looking for advice, and I have a lot of experience, and my wife has a lot of experience in things that are useful for how they're looking at growing their operations, whether it's profit or for profit or nonprofit. I would say that most of my focus is on the fundraising side, like how are we helping how are nonprofits doing their digital fundraising, how are political campaigns and agencies advising their advertising operations around fundraising and helping them optimize that.
Very cool.
There is, you mentioned before, we're another thing that I had started back in the Rev days was create a majority pack, and we're launching a thing today actually, which is howmanyTrumpDeaths.com, and that is a project that I've been thinking about for a while, which is running dynamic ads with a countdown of how many days left to vote and how many people have unfortunately died because of COVID in the US. And, to me, Trump is going to do whatever he can to distract that for the final 2 weeks. And I think we all just need to remember going to the end of the election that, there are a lot of reasons not to support Trump, but like one of the biggest ones is that he grossly mishandled the pandemic, and things would be a lot different right now if we were listening to scientists and people who have experience with dealing with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you can find more information about Creative Majority at creativemajoritypack.com.
And howmanyTrumpDeaths.com is the new project.
HowmanyTrumpDeaths.com. That is not.
No, we're just hitting it right over the head on that one. But it's
yep.
I don't mean to end it on a depressing note, but that's unfortunately the reality of our times.
Well, John, do you have any more questions for Keegan?
No, not right now. This was amazing.
Keegan, I have one question. I have one more question. What's your prediction?
Okay.
There we go.
I'll tell you, my hope is that we have a Democratic Senate, House, and White House. I'm a little wary of 2016. I was one of the people who was like, there's warning signs, but I didn't want to be like the naysayer because I already pissed off so many people criticizing Hillary's operation. So I didn't want to be like one of the people out there publicly be like Trump may win. But like never say never. But it's if I had to put my money on it right now, I would say that there's going to be a big win for the Democrats, and I hope I'm right.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Keegan. We hope you come back and visit us again.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you, John and Kevin. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. It was great to hear from Keegan, someone who was on the front lines of a major presidential campaign.
Yeah.
And to hear what that experience is like.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I can't even imagine the amount of stress that you would have in that kind of position. Right. Like he was talking about how he didn't really sleep during that time. And I feel like even that is a bit of an understatement, like just the pressure. Yeah. Right. And
I like how he put it, building the plane in the air, right. Which I have to imagine it's like for anyone working on these campaigns, especially in the modern era.
Yeah.
Like, how do you react quickly and strategically to a never-ending stream of news?
Well, was there anything there that you were surprised by? Like, was there anything in particular that struck you as being even more extreme than you would have expected for a political campaign?
The turnaround time when he was kind of given a directive from the campaign, right? He said that they needed to fill that stadium in Seattle in the next 48 hours.
Right.
So he had to target ads at certain zip codes to get that stadium in Seattle filled. That's a crazy request.
It is.
Fill a stadium in 2 days.
It is. I know.
I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of people already going, but I don't think as marketers generally you get that kind of request.
Yeah. And let me take this second to say, to our freelance writers, your deadlines aren't that bad, right? They're not that bad.
Exactly. Put it in perspective.
It could be way worse. We're not asking you to fill stadiums.
Yeah. And it's with a political campaign, it seems that you need to be prepared for anything and be able to change directions on a dime. And with a huge budget, like a presidential campaign budget, where it's all right, spend this $100,000 in the next 48 hours and make sure it has a good return on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost lament that we didn't ask more about what does it feel like wielding that kind of budget and just being I guess because it's a little bit sky's the limit, but then there's also weirdness that gets into like those things are managed differently, right? Like those funds are essentially I think especially with Bernie, a lot of them were donated, right?
Yeah, and there's very specific rules on how they can be spent.
Right.
And there is a long history of digital advertising in politics because, politics is usually behind on this kind of thing, and digital advertising hasn't been around that long.
Right.
You know what I mean? So combining those two worlds is fairly new, especially in 2016.
Well, so do you think that it could be said to some degree that the way that political campaigns are being run and say more steps moving forward in digital marketing are essentially kind of growing together at the same time here? Do you think that there were changes that have occurred as a result of things that have happened in 2016? We got a little bit of
100%.
Yeah, we had Keegan talk on that, but I'd be curious about your perspective as well.
Well, yeah. So Twitter banned political ads completely.
Right.
Facebook is doing a post hoc version of that where they're banning new political ads a week before the election and after until it's all decided. And Google's doing the same. But yeah, I mean, I think that brings up a great point about the influence of social media in our politics.
Right.
I think we can all agree we don't like how much influence these platforms have in our elections. And we would love it if they were able to stop the spread of misinformation. But thus far, they've done a terrible job.
Right.
And as Keegan pointed out, their attempts to rectify the issue can have a reverse effect.
Yeah. I mean, he expressed his opinion on it, and honestly, it made me realize that I'm not even really sure where I stand on what the best move is there. But the one thing for me, so I'm 35. This isn't my first rodeo, but there is a marked difference. You know what I mean? In the political landscape and the way that it feels. And I think Keegan talked about this as well. It's it used to be election season, and it's election year or the second election year at this point, where this pervasive
24-hour news era we live in.
Right.
So it just never stops.
Directly filters into or often from social media. And then, you've got things like campaigns that are being run grassroots that are also creating some of this. And there's just this huge amount of information. And while it's
misinformation.
And misinformation, right? Like, while there's often this idea that, say campaigns are creating or crafting a narrative, that isn't an inherently bad thing. Of course,
right.
every campaign, not just political campaigns, in terms of marketing, are trying to create a narrative. But yeah, it's a little strange when sort of everyone has the same size soapbox.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that none of these platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or even the 24-hour news networks, were designed to proliferate truth or do a public service.
Right.
They were designed to increase engagement and make money through advertising. And they've done that through algorithms that encourage more and more extreme content. That's
right.
how they get more and more engagement. So they became these arbiters of truth, whether we like it or not, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
And that's really not what they were meant to be.
Right.
And so these patchwork solutions are either naively inadequate at best, and at worst, they're intentionally inadequate. And they're just not doing enough to get people off their backs. Am I right?
Well, so we asked this to Keegan too, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it, as at least my kind of final thought on this is, what do you think that the future is like? Is this sustainable in this current state? I imagine it isn't.
No. I mean, this is what the debate comes down to, I think, is do we regulate these companies?
Right.
Or do we continue to let them regulate themselves and decide where to draw the line?
Right.
I mean, my opinion is they need regulation. I don't want Mark Zuckerberg deciding what is and isn't news or is and isn't truth.
Right.
I don't think that's his place. And he's said as much.
Yeah.
And now they're just kind of doing like PR work, pretty much is what it feels like. It's not policy.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's tough.
It is.
It's not like a simple solution, but there definitely needs to be some kind of improvement going forward, because I mean, 2016 was kind of a disaster on the end of these companies, and it hasn't really been improved.
No. Yeah, this whole thing is just another sort of byproduct of this ridiculous invention we call the internet at this point. It's just been a continuing spiral. But one thing that is not a continuing spiral is we'd really love it if you listen to this podcast to head over to iTunes, I think. Is that what they're calling it these days?
The iTunes.
The iTunes.
It's called the iTunes now.
Well, head over to the iTunes and give us a like and is that what we need?
A like, a share, a subscription, I believe.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then we'll
subscribe.
Right. Yes. Please head over to iTunes, subscribe.
Or
is it Apple Music
or Spotify? Apple Podcasts now. Actually, it's actually Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, Anchor.
I'm
wherever
so tempted.
Major podcasts can be listened to.
I'm so tempted to keep this disaster of a promo.
Yeah, I think you should.
I think I'm going to keep it. Well, that's all I've got for this episode.
Well, let's close out with, if you haven't done so yet, go out there and vote.
Yeah.
Vote your heart. Vote your conscience. Or don't. John and I aren't your parents.
No, we're not your parents.
Yeah, my kids don't listen to this show. So, good luck.
Good luck. Vote. And if you don't vote, vote for us on iTunes.
Yeah, that's perfect.
See you next time, guys.